Welcome to episode 261 of Sports Geek. On this week's episode, I chat with David Barton-Ginger about his career at New Zealand Rugby and the growth of the global powerhouse that is the All Blacks.
Welcome to Sports Geek, the podcast built for sports digital and sports business professionals. And now, here's your host, who is not a good karaoke partner, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. Yes, my name is Sean Callanan, and those of you who have been to Seek Conference, especially the one in Las Vegas, know I am a terrible, absolutely terrible karaoke partner. So much so that I got thrown out of a venue for jumping the line for singing a bad version of Hey Ya. And I think if my recollection is correct, there is a version of that on the internet, thanks to Russell Scabetti. But for now, yes, I can do everything else but karaoke. With a microphone, I can do podcasting, speaking, a little bit of comedy, but don't get me to sing. If you want to reach out to me, you can do so multitude of ways. At Sean Callanan on Twitter, Sean Callanan on LinkedIn if we're not connected. My apologies. I really do try to connect with as many people as I can, especially listeners of the podcast. So if you want to connect with me the old-fashioned way, you can use email, sean@sportsgeekhq.com. Before I jump into this week's episode with David Barton-Ginger from New Zealand Rugby, just a quick shout-out for the Patreon campaign. Thank you to those who have supported the Patreon campaign so far. You can do so by going to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. The Patreon campaign helps support what I'm doing right here, the podcasts that we're producing, the newsletters that we're producing in the sports business space. If you are getting value from these content pieces, I'd love your support. You can do so as a personal supporter for $4 or more a month. You get to choose. And if you're a brand looking to reach a sport, business, and a technology market, you can do so as a supporter and get your company name, logo, and link in every single show notes, including this one, which will be at sportsgeekhq.com/261. Well, let's get into it. Here is my chat with David Barton-Ginger from New Zealand Rugby. Very happy to have David Barton-Ginger, Digital Channels Manager and Head of Digital at New Zealand Rugby and the All Blacks. Welcome to the podcast, David.
Thanks, Sean. It has taken us a little while to get to connect with each other, hasn't it?
It has, both in time to organise this interview and actually get this interview started. So maybe at some stage we will release the failed attempts of technology where we have half sentences. It was like having a podcast interview with Uncle Buck where both of us were having half sentences, but fingers crossed, we've got everything in line now that this will be an interview that's listenable. So first of all, getting started, David, you've been at New Zealand Rugby since 2004, which is, eons, if we sort of count digital years like dog years, which every year is 7. My 7 times tables aren't that good, but 17 years at a sporting organisation is a great innings so far. But how did you find your way into New Zealand Rugby in 2004?
Yeah, look, I'd been in banking for about 10 years, actually, before that. I'd been over in London for about 5 years in the investment banking scene over there. My wife and I got pregnant and came back to New Zealand. And just after we got back, I had a friend who happened to be working for New Zealand Rugby Union. And at the time, they didn't have any control over their own website, which was nzrugby.co.nz back then.
So was that just sold or effectively on-sold to someone to say, hey, can you guys manage it? That's how it was at that point?
Yeah, exactly. It was a partner of ours who was running it at the time, and they had their own journalists there who we used to run the content on it. And what tended to happen was that we'd give them a media release to put up, and it would take 2 or 3 days to go up, and every now and again there'd be a story appear on the site which wasn't overly complimentary to New Zealand Rugby, and I think that those were probably the initial reasons why we decided to bring that back, or that control back, to New Zealand Rugby, and it was at that point where the other party said, right, you've got 6 weeks, and then we're going to turn it off.
Yep.
So
6 weeks, when someone says 6 weeks, you've got to migrate a whole platform across. If someone said that now, you'd be sweating bullets, because you'd have all this infrastructure and different architecture. What does the All Blacks or New Zealand Rugby at that stage website look like in 2004?
It only consisted of probably, I don't know, half a dozen to a dozen pages.
Yep.
It still had a bit of content on there, when it comes to teams and things like that, and different competitions, domestic competitions at the time. And so I came in, I literally had an interview, I think it was on the Friday, and started work on the Monday. I came in, and the first thing that I decided was, look, there's no way we're going to come up with a new design website. So
yep.
I picked a small web development agency here, so we were the big fish in a small pond.
Yep. And
said, right, I want you to just replicate that site. So I think essentially they just ripped off all the HTML from the internet, and when we went to cut over, they turned the site off. We turned ours on, and essentially it looked like exactly the same website. And what that did was buy us time to then sit back and go, right, how do we want to play this from here?
Because, really, 2004, it's not like you had a whole bunch of options around CMS and those kind of things. It's like, you're not. Whereas these days, if someone said, "Hey, build a website," you can go, "Oh, we can use WordPress, or we can use a commercial CMS that's out there and pay for that," and those kind of things. This was, again, early web, primarily bespoke HTML built. That pretty much what sites were put together.
Exactly, mate. That's all it was. So it was really just a pamphlet sitting online, more or less, with a whole lot of information on it, done in HTML, and that's what I'd actually when I had a break back in New Zealand during my banking days, I actually did a HTML internet course or diploma,
yep.
And so that kind of qualified me for coming in and knowing what I was doing. So it was good little exercise.
So pretty much you came in pretty much on a tech focused role, because that's what you'd done in the banking space, in building websites and playing around with what was digital then and web and those kind of things. That was pretty much, I guess, your intro into the business, because things like
a little
head
bit
of
different
digital,
to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a little bit different to that. So I was actually a foreign exchange dealer.
Okay.
and I just decided I'd wanted to get out of banking. And
yep.
When I'd come back to New Zealand, I'd actually initially tried to get into photography, and it was really at that point in time there was only one decent photography institution here in New Zealand, and I was 2 weeks late to get into the course.
Yep.
And so I'd actually met a girl at a party who'd said, "Oh, I've just done this internet course and it's amazing." And I was driving along, so actually maybe I could do something there and use my business knowledge and then my creative side and get into the internet side of things. And that's why I chose to do the diploma and never really looked back.
That sounds very much like a sliding doors moment. I mean, you could be on a photography podcast right now if you'd have been able to get to that course.
Indeed.
So we've just gone through a Rugby World Cup. That was your fourth Rugby World Cup that you've been through?
I think it was. So it was 07, 11, 15 and 19. Yeah.
So how have, each of those sort of milestones sort of point to like the different explosions of digital and social. Like 2007 was like at the epicenter of when that stuff was starting, like that social media really wasn't a thing yet. And then you effectively had the 2011 one, which I've, spoken to Shane Harmon about. He was working on the Rugby World Cup in 2011 when Facebook and Twitter were starting to be real big players in the space and people were trying to figure it out. How have your campaigns changed from a digital perspective through those Rugby World Cups?
Yeah, incredibly, and really fortunately for me, 2007 was our worst World Cup we'd ever had. And fortunately, at that point in time, we didn't have any kind of social media presence. I don't really think that it had started up too much by then. So essentially, we went out in the quarterfinals in that competition, and it was really just shut down and go and work in a garden for a couple of days.
Just don't listen to radio, right?
Indeed. Don't listen to radio, don't watch TV, and then you were fine. And then for the next two, we obviously won those in 2011 and 2015. So, it was pretty good, easy from my perspective, because you weren't really trying to manage any out, and you didn't have all these haters, having a go at you because you just won two competitions. And so, look, I mean, it's a long way back now looking at 2011, but the key differences there really is in 2011 we were running the World Cup. It was in New Zealand, whereas in 2015 that was over in England. And really the biggest differences there were around the fact that you had to deal with these time differences, time zones. You had a team here that were, based from, we'd have different shifts going through to about 11 o'clock at night in 2015, whereas in 2011 it was actually quite easy because you could do it all in your working day, so to speak. So those were really the key differences. And in 2015 we had Instagram come to the mix. By then it wasn't really that big. So, it was really just the tools that we had at the time and the time differences that were the key differences.
And also, I guess, through that time, through winning the World Cup twice, the All Blacks have become, and the mystique around the All Blacks have become a global brand. How do you balance, I guess, the local focus being, New Zealand's team, to, I guess, also addressing that global audience that the All Blacks are attracting? Yeah,
so, I mean, over 80% of our audience live offshore, or our fan base is offshore. So the key difference really is that in New Zealand, when it comes to rugby, probably the biggest issue we've got here is that you got so much rugby that people start to tune up and looking for other things, whereas the offshore audience is just so gagging to get as much rugby or All Blacks content as they can get. So it's really about what content do we in those two markets, and so we do put a focus on that. We have people within here that to focus more on that internet content that our global audience wants. We do some geo-targeting of our content to make sure information is more relevant to them. So those are like a couple of key things that we look to do. Then around Rugby World Cups, in terms of our local, we do big campaigns before each World, where we send the All Blacks out into the community. So it's about connecting with our local fan base here. We send out three All Blacks to different parts of the country, and usually parts of the country or small towns that wouldn't ever see them normally. So it's a really nice way to connect with our local audience and really garner that support before they leave. And then once they leave to go to a World Cup, it really is about connecting with that global fan base. And primarily that's done through digital channels. So, there's a big audience out there, and the only way they can connect with the All Blacks is through digital. So it's an incredibly powerful tool for us.
So you talked a bit about, I guess, the global piece and the geo-targeting of, so I've spoken to some of the big Premier League clubs and the big football clubs that also are playing around with that, with localizing content for different regions. How important is that piece for you guys? Because to be able to connect with those regions in that sort of, I guess, local manner, and making sure some of the messages are getting tailored for those different audiences?
Yeah, look, it's really essential, actually, I think, because it's all about being relevant to the audience. And so we tend to also work closely with our partners, with the AIGs, the Adidas's and likes, to tailor content for those particular audiences. There was a big AIG brand campaign we've run since 2017 over there. So we create some content. We look to use multilingual content where we can. So we tend to try and do as much as we possibly can with the resources that we've got. But the benefit that we've as an All Blacks brand is that no matter what we put out there, our fan base usually can't get enough of, particularly in the offshore sense.
Yep. It is. I think the All Blacks is a really good example of sports brands in that how big they are. So All Blacks being a massive global brand, but the resourcing for the global brand, doesn't match the size of the brand. Can you talk a little bit about, because people go, oh, you're the All Blacks, you must have, thousands of, this team of people to be able to do all of these things. What does your team look like, and what does the makeup of the team look like, whether it's in a regular year, but then also what do you do to scale that out around something like the Rugby World Cup? What are the kind of resources you have to lean on to be able to service this global fan base?
Yeah, you'd be surprised. So look, I ran it by myself for 10 years.
Yep.
We're up to a team of 5 now. So we have myself and another guy who's a content producer who sits alongside me. We have now 2 full-time writers,
yep.
And then we have a full-time videographer. And so that's not only with the All Blacks, but also all the teams in black. So we have the Māori All Blacks, we have the Black Ferns, so the women's version of the All Blacks. We have the men's and women's sevens teams, and then a couple of other teams, or under 20s. So we've got a bunch of teams, and at some point in the year, they're all travelling around the world. And
yep.
we tend to have, if not our full-time videographer travelling with them, we will have a couple of contract videographers who we also use.
Yep.
And then, look, when we scale up, we also have another couple of writers or journalists who we tend to lean on as well in terms of written content. And in terms of the 5 of us who are on here, the key thing that we look for now that we perhaps didn't do, 5 years ago, if not longer, was really having the ability to multitask. So now we wouldn't take on just a content editor. We need someone that can write plus shoot video plus edit. And really
so those all-round players, because you've got so much demand of multiple pieces of content.
Completely, and what we're finding now is instead of using a $12,000 camera for everything, we're starting to shoot a lot more on the likes of your iPhone, and have a mic that goes into your phone and edit that up, and not be quite as produced as what we have done in the past. And now it's really about getting that information or that story out a lot quicker, and actually being able to have the tools in place so each of those team members can do that themselves and get it out onto our channels.
And it is at that speed, like the fans want it faster and more of it, and they don't mind to lose a little bit of polish. You've still got to set your bar high enough, but it's much better to the shorter, sharper videos and those kind of things. That's what you're seeing that the fans want.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And because once you've got a couple of media organisations here in New Zealand, and I'm sure it's the same anywhere else, that you can go and try and do a nice polished video, but if you haven't beaten the 6 o'clock news at night,
yep.
Then all of a sudden it's just not as current as as what it should be. So we've really got to try and beat those media networks now, and otherwise you just don't get the cut through. Particularly in New Zealand, probably it'd be okay offshore, but even now the offshore audiences are tuned into the different media networks, websites, and digital channels to get that
how do you manage a team in multiple locations, multiple countries, with the motto of, hey, we've got to get it out fast and be first, and we still want to hit our brand marks, those kind of things that we've set up. How do you manage that team?
Yeah, well, look, so we have like a couple of mottos there, really. So the first one is that we want to be on the shoulder, or we want the fan to feel like they're on the shoulder of the team.
Yep.
And then the other thing is really about using our unfair advantage. And so what that means is that it's really our access to the team that really sets us apart from media organisations. And then it's really about capturing those moments where if anyone comes into any of our social channels or onto our website, they feel like that, they're almost getting a story of what's going on each day of, being with the All Blacks.
Yep.
Whether it's on game day or any day during the week. And, and sometimes we do that better than others, but it's certainly something that we use as our North Star in terms of measuring whether we're doing a good job or not. And we certainly get great feedback from our fans if we're doing a good job at that.
Yep. So from a, team collaboration point of view, how do you coordinate it? Because it's, a lot of people will have, a videographer on the road or someone that's shooting some material, because like to be the, put the fan on the shoulder, you sort of need someone there, pulling out a phone as the guys are getting off a bus or as they're walking out on the track for a captain's run or whatever. So you're capturing this bit of content. How do you coordinate that with your team? Yeah,
look, and it's a lot easier now than what it was. So what we tend to do now is WhatsApp is a really, a well-used piece of kit that we use now. So instead of our people on the ground having to capture it and edit it, what tends to happen a lot now is we have a editing team back in the office, and and those people who are capturing it can just WhatsApp that content straight back to the office, and they're the ones there that can just put it straight up onto our social media channels. So that makes things a lot quicker and a hell of a lot more coordinated. In particular, those tournaments where it is in Japan or the tournament is in England, it just makes things so much easier. So WhatsApp, and then we have another one that we use called editmate.com, and that allows us to get a whole bunch of content or user-generated content to come in, and for us to edit it here as well. And the bonus at that one is that unlike WhatsApp, with EditMate you don't lose any of the quality, so you still get a HD quality video that you can pretty much use on any platform that you want.
Okay, because if they're sending it via WhatsApp, it can get compressed and those kind of things getting sent back. Okay.
Yeah.
And so it's just a bit of a coordination of that to effectively set those roles of, you're someone that's capturing the content. We just want you to capture it. We're not stressed about you capturing it, cutting it up, figuring out how to phrase the tweet or the Instagram and those kind of things. It was all just getting sent back to effectively a control center in New Zealand.
Yeah. So in between, say, 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. New Zealand time, they would do that. Outside of those hours, they would know that they need to do that themselves.
Okay.
So just to give people a break back here.
And then, so part of that piece of, your focus of having access to the team and that kind of thing, one of the things that has grown, since the advent of social media, and probably more so in the last 4 years, is the rise of players as brands themselves, especially in the digital space. We've seen the rise of player-driven media and players being media channels in their own right. We see the reports of Cristiano Ronaldo getting nearly $1 million for an Instagram post. You've got some pretty big stars that play in the All Blacks. How do you manage that as both as partly a problem and opportunity on how you manage and make the players part of, I guess, the digital story, because they're a very big part. They're the stars in the middle. But how do you weave some of their social in your overall strategy?
Yeah, look, that's really something that's coming to the fore now.
Yep.
It hasn't been around for very long. So I couldn't sit down here and honestly tell you that we've nailed it, but the approach that we are going to take is about working a lot closer with our athletes.
Yep.
So, yes, while they have got big followings, none of them, match what we've got. And so I think we can have a relationship where we can work together and it benefits both us and the athlete. I think that's a really good, healthy relationship to have. I'm a big fan of helping athletes set themselves up while they're an All Black, for example, for life after being an All Black. So
yep.
What we tend to try and do, or the ideas we come up with is around, right, outside of being a rugby player, what are your passions?
Yep.
And so we try and work on those. And so, right, well, let's tell a story about, one of the players might be a hunter or a fisherman in his spare time. Let's do some episodes or episodic content around those. And so what will happen is after they're an All Black, they're setting themselves up to be picked up by a fishing show on TV or
yep.
something like that. And we've done it with a couple of our guys who have gone on to be presenters on Sky TV.
Yep.
Purely because of what they've done on allblacks.com. So, yeah, look, it's something I think that will develop in time. It's just about fostering closer relationships with the players, which hasn't always been the easiest thing to do because they're all scattered around the country. So
yep.
We'll do things, some ideas that I've gained off other sporting organisations when I was at the SEEP conference, for example, is simple things like creating WhatsApp groups between us, the players' agents, the player, often the player's wife and or partner, and maybe the players' association as well. So I don't know if you see many on social media, you'll see football players when they nut someone in a practice session, the first thing they do is turn around to the videographer and say, "Did you catch that?"
Yeah.
And so they've already got that network set up so that the videographer can just jump on the WhatsApp group with that player and forward them the content. And then you kind of, just by doing that, you're building a relationship with the player and you get to a good space where I think everyone can win out of that relationship.
Yeah, and I think the players that are coming through now, they're not players that have started to figure out social and digital. They've grown up with it already existing, right? So the players that are coming through now aren't going, I remember when Twitter and Instagram came in. It's been in their whole life. And, they were using it before they were an All Black. They see the advantages of building out their network. So whereas, 7 or 8 years ago, you were teaching the top players about these things and they were sort of using it because they may have been advised by their PR firm or their agent that they should be doing it. I think you're going to see, more a collaborative piece because, they should know, hey, if I'm featuring here, it will grow my social following. And as you said, set them up for other careers, sell books, promote their businesses, those kind of things. So it's definitely a relationship that works for both sides.
Completely.
And then looking at the Rugby World Cup this year, what were some of your goals before we dive into the stats and sort of geek out a little bit? What were some of your goals from a digital point of view going into the Rugby World Cup in Japan?
So I think rather than from a digital perspective, we do have, while we do have some figures that we would like to meet, it was really about using our channels to connect with that audience, like I mentioned before.
Yep.
We've got a membership or a Team All Blacks area which sits alongside our social channels. We've got a goal there where we want to reach a million fans. So a lot of our content was looking to help boost that number. We're up to about 890,000, I think it is.
Okay.
So we're well ahead of where we wanted to be. We're looking to be 1 million by the end of next year.
And that's pretty much a case of trying to own your audience, and because we're renting them on these social channels. How can we get them into our house and start owning that data and figuring out how we use that data?
Yeah, absolutely, mate. So it's just so you don't have to rely on any platform that could change their rules at any given moment and leave you in the lurch, so to speak. Yep. So look, that's grown really well. We're starting to see some real value out of that in terms of our ability to sell tickets to matches, to market for merchandise, but also in terms of what it's worth to our partners, our sponsors as well. So enabling them to connect with our fan base. So we're really starting to see the dividends of having that. And moving forward, what we're looking to do is probably evolve that now. So actually, it's not all about just starting to just make someone sign up to an email to become a Team All Blacks fan. Actually, any way that if people are coming in and engaging with us on any platform, they kind of almost become a Team All Blacks fan anyway. I think the days of measuring success of a membership by getting their email address is over. And some people, while they'll call themselves an All Blacks fan, might never open an email from someone like us.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a really good point, because it is about managing. You can say, yes, we want to secure that email and get the people into our database, and so everyone's on their CRM strategy to do that, and to be getting close to 1 million fans is an amazing effort. But how do you balance that piece of hey, I want to engage this fan and I don't want to sell them or pitch them to join Team All Blacks, because actually I want to build up their fandom a little bit before we put that offer to them. How did you do that balance in the Rugby World Cup? Because you've got this high engagement and lots of people concentrate, following the games and seeing the highlights and riding the highs and lows of each result. How do you get that balance between getting that engagement, but then also putting the message in to say, if you want more, if you want that inner sanctum experience, you want to feel a bit closer, join Team All Blacks. How did you get that balance right?
Yeah, look, I'm not saying we did get the balance right, because it's an ongoing discussion we have within here. Look, so what we do is we pick out key moments from it, and we'll say, right, of those key moments, we will put those behind a Team All Blacks registration wall. Yep. Prime example of that would be in the sheds after a match. Yep. But what we have tended to do is to look at it and say, right, we have our casual snacking fans, but we also have our passionate fans who will watch hours of content if you gave them the opportunity and it was compelling enough. And it's that kind of longer form content that we would put on our website and point people towards if they want to watch it. But we also need shorter, snappier, content that we would put on our social media channels. And then if they want to see more or the longer form of that piece of content, then that's when we drive them into Team All Blacks. But again, we may change that strategy moving forward, where it's not so much around driving them to Team All Blacks, but it's about connecting with as many fans as possible. And then there'll be certain bits of content which, you'll need to sign up for. Yep. But we don't want to restrict it necessarily by channel anymore. And we're just kind of toying with that idea at the moment.
Because effectively it's not a paywall, it's like a passion wall. Effectively, it's like if you've got to this level and you really want to see this content, it's not a high price. Like data is the price, but it's a matter of getting that balance right. And I think that snackable, shorter content is the piece to go. Here's how we warm you up, so to speak, and then so you just sort of put some behind that Team All Blacks. Like a passion wall, effectively, to say, well, this is you've liked our content, you got this far, you really shouldn't be complaining about it, because all you've got to do is give us this data, and that's the transaction.
And so the conversation we're having here at the moment is like, should we punish, if that's the right word to use, should we punish a 15-year-old who's really passionate about the All Blacks, spends all their time on social media channels, doesn't, never really uses email, and probably would never go to allblacks.com, or if they do, very seldomly. So how does that person get that really cool content? Should we be restricting them? And those are the conversations we've been having recently, and since the World Cup, and we'll be looking to evolve, I think.
Well, it is that is also the balancing act, because you're talking to partners to say this is how many people have watched this video and this is our audience, and then effectively you're putting, your team is putting in a lot of effort on a particular long form piece of video, and you're showing it to 1 million people instead of 20 million people. Obviously, the numbers are going to be different, but it's a different, and it's like, is it worth us putting in the effort for producing a piece of content for this smaller audience? Because just because there's 1 million people doesn't mean you've got 1 million people watching that piece, because it's percentages of that. And so I'm guessing that's where those conversations are going on the value for effort, the value of those fans, the people that are inside Team All Blacks. Are they worth more than, like you said, the 15-year-old that's just coming on board? Exactly.
So, it's where that value proposition is, where we start to monetize that content. So, I've analysed a lot of sporting organisations around the world now, and one of the things I'm finding is that the value is coming out from connecting our partners, our audience, not about restricting that audience, and trying to sell them something, a subscription or something like that. The real value is coming out of connecting with as many fans around the world as possible, segmenting those and connecting our partners with relevant offers and offers that add value to those fans in one way, shape or another.
Completely. I mean, my friends in the US, because they say niche, not niche, because in their rhymes, they would say the riches are in the niches. In getting those smaller audiences that are highly engaged, whether they be different, in your case, geographical regions or different platforms, those kind of things, that actually where the value is starting to come for partners, as opposed to, hey, here's the big number. It's like, well, if we can get a certain type of fan engaged, then we're actually getting some value there. Did you want to take us through some of those stats? Like, there are some big stats from your Rugby World Cup from an impressions and reach point of view. Was there any particular, what was your, if you're giving out gold, silver and bronze medallions to social media platforms, what was your rankings for engagement? And again, what were the key things you were looking at? Whether it's growth or engagement or reach or impressions, like what are some of the key stats that are the ones that you're drawn to, or the ones that you sort of celebrate?
Yeah, look, we look at all of those, to be honest. I think from the Rugby World Cup just gone, I think Instagram still tends to outperform the others. We certainly had a much bigger net follower growth over the Rugby World Cup than any of the other platforms. But the engagement that we get out of that as well, is pretty phenomenal. And then also Twitter and Facebook. Obviously, with Facebook, we've got 4.7 million followers on there. So just in terms of general reach and engagement, again on there, it's pretty impressive. And we're working a lot closely now with each of those to come up with better content for our fans. And then in comparison to the 2015 World Cup, we're probably doing a little bit less in terms of actual posts, but what the posts we are doing are a lot more engaging than what we had done back then. And that's really about going back and look what we did back then, worked, what didn't, and then tweaking those and using those as a guide in terms of a content strategy for this Rugby World Cup as well.
Yeah, I mean, from the stats that you shared with me, like the main thing that jumped out at me was that it was all around engagement. Like you had strong engagement, and again, all of the stats sort of said what a lot of people are saying: Instagram being a really good engagement platform, and is where like most of the activity that is happening in the social space. But also the fact that you've done such a good job over the last 7-8 years that you are getting, from a growth point of view, you didn't get a big jump in numbers because you've done a good job of growing those audiences on those platforms over time. You didn't see the spike that you might have seen at other tournaments of new people coming on and finding you. So that, were you expecting, I guess, that as an overall thing going into the tournament?
Yeah, well, I think it's just the maturity of those platforms too, So, we're not expecting to see massive growth out of Facebook like we did, in either of the last 2 World Cups.
Yeah.
Purely because those people who are fans of the All Blacks, who are really, engaged on social media, they're probably already our fan, you know. So it's just a maturity thing, and I think that's why we've seen such good growth on Instagram over the last few, 3 or 4 years. It's because it's a newer platform than the other two, Twitter and Facebook. They're the 2 main ones that we use.
Yeah, and the growth, I guess, it's tracking the same way as the platforms are. Right, we're not seeing Facebook grow, and we're not seeing Twitter grow in the same way, and we're still seeing that growth in Instagram as it chases down Facebook. So, David, wrapping up this pod, I want to get to the Sports Geek Closing 5. I'm here with David Barton-Ginger. Do you remember the first sports event you ever attended?
Look, I'm racking my brain on that. I would have to say that was a one-day cricket match between the Black Caps and Sri Lanka at McLean Park in Napier. I was probably about 8 years old. So good baking hot day and
What were some of the names that would have been playing for New Zealand back then? The Crow brothers, potentially?
Lance Cairns.
Yep.
Richard Hadley. Ewan Chatfield, Martin Snedden.
Martin Snedden, who would then go on to run the Rugby World Cup.
Exactly.
Talk about a good sport. It's a story, and connecting multiple sports. You would have been to a few rugby matches over your time and a few sports events. Do you have a favourite food memory or a go-to food at a sports event?
I'm going to be really boring on that, and I'd say a good hot dog and tomato sauce.
No, that's fine. Like it's sometimes it's sort of like you just revert. You go, oh, now I know I'm at a sports event because I have a hot dog in my hand. So, what's the first app you open in the morning?
Much to my wife's dismay, the last app that I will have open in the evening, and the first one I open up in the morning is the BBC.
Okay.
I'm an absolute news tragic.
Yep. Okay. And then I guess it's WhatsApp to see what things are coming through from your teams around the world?
Yep. WhatsApp to a degree, and then also Instagram in terms of a social media platform.
Yep. And is there someone that you suggest the podcast listeners should follow that either you read or listen to, or a colleague you think's doing a great job?
I think outside of your one, I listen routinely to the Social Media Talk Show and Social Media Marketing.
Okay.
So it's Michael Stelzner.
Yes.
They're really good at just keeping me up to date from a social media perspective each week.
And have a real strong, social media marketing focus. So how people are using it for business results or growth and those kind of things. Yeah. I've been to a couple of their conferences and know Mike. So, yes, it's a good listen. What social media platform is your MVP? Whether it's you probably answer it from a All Blacks perspective and then maybe a personal perspective. What's the best one for yourself?
I would have to say Instagram on both counts there. Yep. Instagram is one, that where our really engaged fans are residing. and then just in terms of again a nice snackable kind of content, and then also with the stories now as well. You know, you can get a feel for what's going on in someone's life or their day.
Yeah,
you can't beat Instagram as far as I'm concerned.
And it definitely is that. It is the platform for the around that motto of, you know, fan on the shoulder. Like that, It fits for that type of content, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So, David, how will people find and connect with you? What are the best platforms to do so? And for them to say, "Hey, David, I listened to the podcast, really enjoyed it." What platforms should they connect with you on?
Two there. One would be Instagram, which would be instagram.com/DBGNZ.
Yep.
And same on Twitter, DBGNZ.
DBGNZ is your Twitter handle?
Correct, or NZ for
NZ for the people in the States. And and also they can connect with you on LinkedIn, I'm assuming.
Indeed, yep. There's not too many Barton-Gingers on LinkedIn, so you should be able to find me pretty easily.
No problems. Well, David, thank you very much for coming on the podcast and going through our technical mishaps. Hopefully this is recorded and this hasn't been a 45-minute conversation wasted. It hasn't been. Actually, it wouldn't have been wasted because we've had it, and if no one else listens to this, we'll be at least a benefit of it. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
You're welcome. Great to chat.
New workshops on audience, content, distribution, valuation, and pitch following Sports Geek's Digital to Dollars process. Go to digitaltodollars.com.
Thanks again to David Barton-Ginger from New Zealand Rugby. You can send him a tweet, DBG Tweets, or give him a message, send him a message on Instagram, DBGNZ on Instagram, or, as he said, you can find him on LinkedIn, David Barton-Ginger. There isn't too many David Barton-Gingers on LinkedIn, but please, if you do connect with David and you're doing so because you've listened to this podcast, please let him know that you listened and give him some feedback. I really do appreciate wholeheartedly when guests find out that people are listening to the podcast. It is the best form of feedback, even better than iTunes reviews or Apple Podcast reviews. I love Apple Podcast reviews and people sending them in, but I actually really do love hearing the feedback from guests, and it's quite strange. Strange is not the right word. It's quite fulfilling to touch base with them at about 6 week at the 6 week mark after their episode, and to hear the different people that have reached out to them around the world. So, if you enjoyed that chat with David and you want to know more about what the All Blacks are doing in digital and social, or you just want to dive into a bit of the internet history of building websites back in 2004, please reach out to DBG, as he is known on the internet. Before I wrap up, Digital to Dollars, are you looking to bring more money and more revenue in for your sport or brand in 2020? That's what Digital Dollars is built for. It helps you better define your digital strategy, understand your audiences, understand your content, and get a common language from your digital team to your data team to your commercial team to your partners. Happy to talk through how the process can be applied to your business. We are seeing it being manipulated and transformed in different ways, whether you be a league, a team, a stadium, or even just a personality. So you can check that out at digitaldollars.com, or you can just email me, Sean@sportsgeekhq.com, and we can set up a time to chat about how we can help you. Also in 2020 also means there are new seasons that come on board. New seasons mean there are new players coming on board, which means they come with new issues. And as we sort of discussed there with DBG, athletes are becoming their own digital media platforms. And one of the things that always makes me shake my head a little bit is the fact that the training of athletes in the digital space is relatively left to the athletes. So if you want to at least ensure your players have a baseline knowledge of what they should and shouldn't do, and also provide them with a forum to ask all of those silly questions that they sometimes might not ask a media or a comms person in a club because they don't want to look silly. We're happy to provide social media and digital athlete training, whether that's in a group form or one-on-one if you want to bring up some of your digital rock stars up to speed and elevate them above the crowd. So, yeah, if you're interested in that, you can go to sportsgeekhq.com/social media athlete training. But as always, you can send me an email. That wraps up this episode. Don't forget, keep sending in questions for the Q&A episodes. Please keep sending them in over the break. If you're listening to this after Christmas or in the new year, please keep sending them in. We plan on doing more questions. Those questions can be on sponsorship, content, marketing, digital, broadcast, whatever you like. I will do my best to answer them. You can send them in via social media or Sean@sportsgeekhq.com. Until next episode, don't forget you can sign up and become a patron of Sports Geek and our content in the podcasting and newsletter space by going to sportsgeekhq.com/Patreon. Until next episode, my name is Sean Callanan and you've been listening to Sports Geek.
Join Sports Geek Nation access to exclusive Slack and Facebook groups with regular Q&A sessions with Sean Callanan. Go to sportsgeeknation.com to join. Need help with your digital rate card? Not sure how to price your assets? Is there a disconnect between digital and commercial? That is where Sean works best, in digital divorce counselor mode. Book a time for a call with Sean to discuss the Sports Geek process. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/phone call. Go to sportsgeekhq.com for more sports digital marketing resources.